Welcome to episode 49 of the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram, and today's topic, who am I? Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Okay, when I say who am I, I'm obviously not talking about myself. It's not Jeffrey Ingram's bio, but it is a way I like to look at characters to sort of finish them off. So I've created their motivations. I've created the general traits of the character, but I want something to explain to me, usually a paragraph or two, about what motivates my characters. And there are certain kinds of things I want to know about. And once again, if it's an important character, I'll probably know this going into the story. For secondary characters, as it becomes important to me, I'll probably flesh them out with a who am I. So we go back to that list of motivations from a couple episodes ago, and we can look at that pyramid based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we can see approximately their progression in life. For example, we'll do a little character here called Mary, and she's completely done with security, and she's partially higher up than that. So she's basically filled all of her basic needs according to Maslow. But now she's stretching out beyond. She's sort of, reaching her adulthood, so to say, as a character in the world. Let's give her a few traits. She's intelligent, strong, warrior. Okay. Nothing major there. But now we have to bring that together under the who am I. So one, what's the personality of the character? And I'm not going to describe give them a personality type, which might seem odd. I'm going to focus on the personality through a couple questions. And I'll combine that with sort of a general idea of how I think of them acting. And for me, let's make Mary a really strong, aggressive person when it comes to the martial arts, the fighting arts. And she is a shy, reserved person when it comes to social interactions. Now, when I say shy here, that might or might not mean that it's a trait shy, but it's just in general, she's less willing to engage there. Once I have a basic idea of that down for Mary, I'm going to look at a few other things that I find very important for stories. When will a character stand their ground? And this is the idea of, when they're back, what puts their back against the wall? And maybe for Mary, it's the question of being asked to have babies and to get married. Maybe Mary doesn't want to have babies or get married. She wants to be out as a warrior. So for her, that would be an area I'd note early on that she would stand her ground in this scenario. What will cause the characters to compromise their principles? People have lines that if they are forced to cross, they will go back against their principles. So maybe Mary has a principle of she's religious to the pantheon of gods. However, maybe she's even willing to die for those gods. And she's more than willing to sacrifice, so she goes off in a holy war. She gets captured by the evil villain of the story, and he's like, I'm going to kill you if you don't denounce your gods and accept my gods. Mary says no, because she's standing her ground on that principle. Then he goes, well, I've captured your little brother, and I'm going to kill him if you don't do it. And maybe that's the thing that causes Mary to compromise her principle. And that's another important line to note. And you really need to know these kind of things on how it interacts with the story. So a lot of these kind of things are going to get fleshed out as you're writing stories with characters, outside of what the basic personality type is. A lot of these questions are going to flesh out as the character interacts with it. And until they're forced to do it in a story, I would advise to not share it out with people, because the character might change a little bit in your mind as you're writing the story. So when they come up to that first question, where they have to stand their ground or compromise their principles. Let them do it in the story if you have the imagination for that. And if, some people might not have the imagination of like they are going to make this choice no matter what, have them make that choice. But I kind of like to let that happen in the story. But then once I have them stand their ground or compromise their principle, I'll track that as well too. Now, the next thing I'd like to look at is what causes a character to move to action or inaction. And this goes back a lot to the principles of the character. If the character has big, strong principles, some are going to have more meaning than other ones. And so I find this really important because this is kind of, you're taking those motivations, those things that you're looking at from your motivations list, and you're sort of saying, what is the area of importance? So maybe she's a little nervous about the idea of having kids and getting married, but it's not that important to her because she thinks sooner or later she's going to need to reproduce. So that's lowered down, and maybe she leads more towards inaction with that. But when it comes to fighting in the name of her gods, that is her preeminent idea. And so she is forced to take action very early if she gets into a scenario where she can start a fight in the name of her gods. Now, this last thing, and I have to give GURPS a complete thanks on this because I'd never thought about it until I played GURPS, is an idea of adding at least 5 quirks to your character. Quirks are not things that really impact the character in the life, and it might to a minor degree, but they're the little actions, the little details that people have that you either love or hate about them. And in and of themselves, quirks aren't bad, so you might be a little paranoid as a quirk, which means you have a tendency to look to see how this is going to hurt you. You have that sort of negative, pessimistic view that things that happen around you in the world are trying to hurt you, but it doesn't rise to the level of like a full-fledged mental illness. So that could be a quirk. Biting your fingernails or toenails, twisting your hair. These are all quirks. They're just little things to add a flavor into a character that you can kind of fall back onto to make them feel more like an actual being that exists rather than this mechanical bot that is hopping over and breaking blocks moving through Mario. Adds a lot of detail because people have these little things about them, and you know them about your family. You know them about your lover, definitely. If you live with them, you really know about them. And you either learn to accept them or they annoy you and you learn to ignore them. However you deal with them, these are the things that really bring people to life. The fact that I will jot down my show notes and I'll keep referring to them here, even though I know what I want to talk about, is just because I like to make sure that I'm covering everything. And I don't have enough time to practice 4 hours before I do every episode. So, quick episode today. So let's hop right to the rating. And once again, this is a basic topic. However, I'll caveat it. Don't get stuck here if you're getting ready to write a story. If you can't think of 5 quirks, 5 little things that, the person does that stick out, keep in mind that you don't know those, and maybe they'll come to you as you're writing the story. If you're not sure where the character is going to compromise or not, you don't have to flesh that out. That can happen in the story. But once you do, just keep them written down so you can refer back to them later. And also, when it comes to action and inaction, same thing. I'm a little bit more picky because I want to know those up front, especially for major characters. What's more likely to cause them to make it take action or to try and not to take action. But you can probably hold off a little bit on non-plot action and actions. So at the beginning, you'll probably definitely want to know where in the plot of the story, if you know there's certain things that are going to happen to this character, you'll want to know ahead of time if they're going to probably take action or try and avoid it. And the quirks, definitely just Google people quirks, or, probably look up, it could be mental illnesses. Just think of things that you see people do all the time that are really minor and that you might not notice. This is a great one for people watchers. If you sit there and like to watch people in action, like you go to Starbucks and you sit back and you watch people reading, or you watch them on their computer or on their phone. Like walking around and texting would probably be a quirk unless you put yourself at risk by doing it. So don't get too stuck on this one. However, ultimately, especially when the story's done, if the character's in there for more than a couple lines, you're probably going to know most of this information about a character by the time the story's done. The world building task for the day. Create a character sheet for your character. And this is not an RPG character sheet. You don't need to know the numbers, the basic speed of a character. You don't need to know if he can hit or if he's less likely to hit with certain weapons. But you want to go through and have a character sheet where you know what the motivations are. You know what the character looks like, and you know the who am I about the character. Because later on, it just gives you a reference point, especially like if you sit back and 6 months later, people decide that they love your character. And they keep saying, could you do more with this character? You have a reference place to go back to and really know something about this character. The real world task for the day. Relax. You've listened to the first 49 episodes of the show. It's been a lot of how to do things. How I do this, how I do that is sort of what I like to call the basics of world building. And if you've gone through and you've done your real world, or more importantly, if you've done the world building task of the day, you're going to find out that you have a good basic core of what I'd call a framework world. And this gives you a place that you can really start to flesh out a world. Whether you're doing it for a role-playing game or you want to have a world that you keep referring to in your publishing endeavors or for a video game, you have the basics. So you know what? Take the afternoon off after this. Just tell your boss I said it's okay if you're at work. I'm sure he'll fire you, but so don't do that. That's probably a bad idea. But go through and relax, read through your stuff, and say, hey, there's stories here already. And I'm missing out on those stories. The tease for this episode, the roadmap for the World Builders Inn. And the whole idea is, I know I spent a lot of time talking about how to do things, and I want to change the format up a little bit into the future. It will always be world building focused. And if you listen to the next episode, you'll find out how it will change. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.